ACW is sponsored by Jabati. Self-care through skincare. Jabati is for everybody. Welcome to ACW Podcast. I am Robin Gabriel-Parson, your host, and our co-host today is Dr. Gary Gabriel, life science expert. Now, we are picking up on a 3-part series on the coronavirus. So we broke it down. And today we're going to discuss the vaccine. Now, if you didn't hear our last discussion, please go back, please listen, and you can add to what we're going to talk about today. But today we're talking about the vaccine. We want everyone to understand the importance of the vaccine, how it affects your body, how it affects people of color. So there's a lot we want to share with you today. So again, today we're here talking about the coronavirus, the vaccine, building the immune system, and the ways to protect yourself from the virus. So welcome, Dr. Gary Gabriel, again, being here, sharing all of your valuable information. We're excited about it. And welcome to ACW Podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I'm happy to share information. As we said in our last segment, we really want to make sure that you have the basics of understanding how to move with your health and the health of your family in this time of the pandemic. And that can cause stress, not knowing and listening to whatever comes through a radio feed or on your smartphone or Facebook news. You know, if you're not sitting there going, you know what, I need to find a source of information that is really an advocate for me, that I can trust. And if I know that these people are like me and they struggle and sort of pursue the same levels of knowledge, I know I can just roll with these guys, and they're gonna guide me in ways that will benefit myself and my family.
So today we're going to talk about the vaccine. Let's start with, what is a vaccine?
Well, what a vaccine is a way of eradicating a foreign substance from your body. So in our own bodies, we have what's called natural immunity. So you have innate immunity and you have adaptive immunity. So you have cells in your body that, for instance, you know, when you get infected with a cold virus or you get a bacterial infection, these cells will seek out that foreign thing and then remove it from your body. So they'll take the cells and your own body cells will act on something foreign to get rid of it. Isn't it amazing the machine that God has produced? He's produced a machine that has its own protection. Your body has its own protection against foreign things. And that protection against foreign things is called immunity. You have natural cells. You have this thing called natural killer cells. You have what's called antigen presenting cells. You have what cells called dendritic cells. You have T cells. You have B cells. You have a whole host of things. Even the very mucus in your nose is a form of protecting you against something foreign. Even the nose hairs, the hairs in your nose, is what God has presented you with the way of taking foreign substances from entering your body. So you see how amazing your body is, that there was enough thought to make this temple called your body, but also give it mechanisms of protection. And so a vaccine is really a chemical component that can be produced outside of the body or can be produced by your own body once it is introduced to some foreign substance, some foreign protein. And that element that is made or produced is called an antibody. So an antibody directs itself against something foreign that has entered your body, and it sets up a whole series of things to get rid of that foreign element. And so that's essentially what a vaccine is. Let's look at it as an element produced that can be produced outside of the body or in the body to get rid of something foreign that can harm your body.
Wow, that's interesting. It makes a lot of sense. Now, how does the vaccine, and you already kind of brought it to the forefront in your last comment, but how does it break down or attack the coronavirus within a person's body?
Yeah, well, nobody, I can tell you, so fact number one, nobody right now, your immune system right now is not prepared for corona. It is, it cannot produce, it can produce some antibody response, but it's not strong enough to stop what the coronavirus can do. So what the coronavirus does, it comes into the body, it finds other proteins that exist on the surface of cells, like in your lungs or in your heart or in any other organ, and it will bind to those proteins in your cells that your cells already have, and it binds through, the coronavirus binds through what's called a spike protein, and then once it binds through a spike protein, it will inject its genetic material into your cells to pretty much act like a Xerox or a copy machine. So it'll inject DNA into your cells, and once it injects those DNA into those cells, though that DNA, that DNA or RNA basically will make many copies of itself with the goal of producing a huge volume or a huge amount of more virus that will then break out of your own cells and then infect other cells, and so infect all the cells around your human cells. So you see what I'm saying? What it is, it's like a Xerox machine making thousands, millions of copies of itself. And once it makes millions of copies, those millions of copies go to infect other cells, and then so on and so on and so on until it takes over the entire body. And that's how coronavirus behaves. So when you look at what does it mean in terms of an immune response to that, is that your body, like I said, it will try to mount some response. So you'll have like a natural killer cells, but it'll try to mount it, but it's not strong enough to overcome that overwhelming Xerox mega copying event that a coronavirus does once it infects your human cell. So you need some help. And that's where a vaccine comes in. So, what happens in the case of a vaccine, you're fooling the coronavirus. So what you're doing is you're making an element, and that element is what's called an immunogen. So that's made outside of the body. So you've heard about companies like Pfizer, and then companies like Moderna, companies like J&J, AstraZeneca, that they're making their versions of what is an immunogen. And what an immunogen does, it is that it sparks your immune system to create antibodies. So here's the way I want you to look at it. Your human system doesn't sit with coronavirus antibodies sitting in your body just waiting for the virus. It has to be primed to do that. In other words, it has to see the foreign body. In this case, the foreign body is the coronavirus itself. That has to enter the body in order for your own immune system to marshal itself up to start to create antibodies. Now, what the Pfizer and Moderna and J&J are doing is that they are introducing their mechanisms into your body through their vaccines to create what's called an immunogen. In other words, your own body's immune system has to be kickstarted in order for you to generate antibodies against COVID. So what the Pfizer and the Moderna And when you look at the J&J components providers they're providing a Kickstarter. They're providing something that once it's in your body, it goes boom, your body goes boom, whoa, that's foreign. So now let me marshal my own body cells to create antibodies now to the Kickstarter that's been introduced by Pfizer, Moderna, or J&J. And that's essentially what these medical vaccines do. They're Kickstarters for your own body's immune system to say, oh, now I have to now create antibodies to the Kickstarter that each company has introduced. So if you're taking Pfizer, you're taking the Pfizer Kickstarter. Taking Moderna, you're taking the Moderna Kickstarter. If you're taking the J&J, you're taking J&J Kickstarter. You need those Kickstarters in order to fight COVID. You're not going to sit there and say, well, you know what? If I eat spinach all day and if I eat beets all day, then I got enough to fight COVID. You know what? Your body will have some kind of immune system. But again, it's not strong enough to overpower the millions of viral particles that COVID, that, like, remember I said about the Xerox copier?
Right.
If that Xerox copier is cranking out 1 million copies of itself, you might mount a little response, but it's not enough response to overwhelm what's happening as a result of that virus just constantly churning things out to overtake your body. So you need a Kickstarter. That's my point.
Thank you for the education. It's making all sense now. Based on how you're breaking this down from a science perspective to how people view this, is making a lot of sense. And I really believe, Dr. Gabriel, if people would spend more time educating themselves about this, it would be less fear. So thank you for releasing the fear and just providing us with information. Thank you for that. Now, in reference to African Americans, because that's who we're really talking to. We're talking to everyone. We want you to understand also this particular population. Do you feel that medicine metabolizes differently in African Americans when it comes to vaccine or just medicine in general?
I will say medicine can metabolize differently in just about everybody. There's a wealth of scientific information that shows that we have differences in how we absorb medicine, how we distribute it around our bodies, how we metabolize it, how we get rid of it. So the short answer to the question is absolutely yes. And it's been shown that enzymes in the body, there's an enzyme called cytochrome P450, and it actually is a metabolizer. It basically metabolizes drugs that you put in your body. And there's a whole field of science called pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. So looking at what the body does to the drug, and then looking at what the drug does to the body. So when you look at the field of pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics, and there's this whole field of study looking at population pharmacokinetics and population pharmacodynamics. And it's been shown that Asian, Latino, Caucasian, Black, African, that there's a wide amount of diversity in that absorption, distribution, metabolism, toxicology state of whether you're Asian or Afro-American. That's why when you do clinical trials and you look at a lot of the drugs that are out here now, like just take over-the-counter drugs. Some people can metabolize things like Tylenol better than others. I can tell you my own personal story. Tylenol does nothing for me. And so what actually happens for me is ibuprofen. I remember a few years ago, I broke my ankle and I was in the hospital, and, they were giving me Percocet and all sorts of oxytocin, and I was not responding to any of it, even at some of the highest dosages. And, I don't know whether it's racism or not. I remember I was sitting in the emergency room and the doctor comes to me and says, I have a personal question for you. I said, yes. He says, "Are you a drug user?" I said, "What do you mean? Why am I a drug user? Do you use recreational drugs?" So, and they were wondering why I was still feeling pain after giving me oxytocin and things like Percocet, um, and I was still in pain. And it just turns out that my metabolism on how I metabolized pain management drugs was very, very different than the patient next to me. And long story short, what really worked for me was ibuprofen. Took ibuprofen, boom, pain went away. I was fine. So that's a case that to say, yes, we do metabolize things differently. We even metabolize differently based on our health state. So if you look at, if I'm obese, I can metabolize things very, very differently. My immune system can respond very differently based on my health status. If I'm obese. So you see how all of this stuff is very much intertwined, and how it's very important to really look at your state of health. Even if I'm a diabetic, I can have variations in immune response. So the answer to the question is absolutely yes.
Appreciate that. And as you mentioned, it goes back to that again, your health. How are you physically, mentally, spiritually? So, that's the key. I'm going to address this question because I've been hearing a lot. I've been talking to a lot of colleagues and people been, within my community, again, this total distrust. Do you feel there's a distrust when it comes to the medical industry and the people of color community, especially African Americans? Again, there is still this distrust. So elaborate on that.
Yeah, absolutely. There's absolute distrust, and we have a historical precedent for it. Everyone, the one that's commonly touted is the Tuskegee experiment, where we were, instead of curing syphilis, we were injected with syphilis, and then and looking at the responses of it. I told you another aspect in looking at how we are perceived as pain. There was a medical study that looked at, that actually published, that said that Afro Americans experience pain far less, and there's also a physician bias where that our mistrust comes from the fact that how our medical community will standardize embracing a lot of our ailments. If you look at sense of pain, looking at doling out pain medication. I told you about my story just a couple of minutes ago, where I had to be an advocate for my own pain, because I'm like, you're not giving me what I need for my pain. So you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna take some ibuprofen. I actually, for me, taking ibuprofen, that wasn't something that the doctor did. That's something I did. I basically said, well, I'm not responding to Percocet and oxytocin, and this pain is killing me. Give me this bottle of ibuprofen. And then it turned out that it actually works for me. So again, the mistrust it caused me to even raise suspicion. Is there a holistic, deep, comprehensive concern for my ailment when I enter the health system? Am I being given the best possible care? Number one. Number two, are there enough people that look like me that understand my condition and my social environment to ask the right questions such that you could get at my pain or discomfort? If I don't see that, then I'm going to not trust what you're telling me, because I have been under a historic wave of racism and biased treatment. Why would I think that be any different in a healthcare environment? I've had individuals tell me that when they've gone into doctors' offices where the doctor is white and they're a person of color, sometimes doctors seem dismissive. Their bedside manner is just not that great. Here, just do this, and then call me in the morning. But doctor, my knee hurts. I don't worry about your knee. That has nothing to do with it. Just do this. So my thing is that there's precedent for having mistrust in the health community. That's why I think there really needs to be strong training and reinforcement of having equitable healthcare or equitable coordination of care in communities of color or underserved communities. That's another thing. We use the word underserved communities, Black folks.
Right.
So let's put it simple and plain on who is really receiving a lot of the scourge of health disparity. And again, you're starting to see that now in COVID, where you see the health disparities coming out very, very strong in terms of how care is delivered. And that's another aspect too. You're looking at some communities of color. They're not a lot of CVS Health or Walgreens or Rite Aids, and people have to travel, or you might live in a rural area. So we have to look at how do we deliver care in mobile fashion to those communities that are not receiving high levels of care. So yes, there's a lot of precedent for mistrust, and that's why I think education is really, really strong. And then 3, that's why I think don't be afraid to be an advocate for your health and ask questions if you don't know. There's no dumb question in looking at your health care.
Yes, and over we keep stressing the importance of advocating for your own health. That is so important. And thank you for addressing the mistrust. And I was listening as you were talking and thinking, going back as an oral historian, looking at how we have been experimented on from colonial times to present. So there is a deep really thought around that in reference to that. So thank you for adding to that. So thank you, Dr. Gabriel, for the vaccine talk. As I mentioned, audience, this is a 3-part series, and because we have so much to discuss, we'll be picking up again on our next podcast. And we're going to talk more about building the immune system. And because you brought that into the conversation constantly in reference to how the two work together. So thank you again, Dr. Gabriel, for coming and sharing all of that research and knowledge. Before we leave, is anything else you'd like to add before we move on?
Yeah, like I said, it's key. The whole focus of these various sessions that we're doing is to make people aware, have the basic awareness to be an advocate for your health. Because if you have the basic awareness, you reduce stress, and stress can be a big contributor also to complications in things like COVID, cancer, diabetes, hypertension, any disease state. But with stress can lower your immune response. Say once you get one of these Kickstarters that we talked about earlier in looking at COVID vaccines. And so our goal is to give you enough information, give you the basics such that you'll have a scaffold of information to advocate for yourself and for your family.
ACW is presented by Partnerships in Fitness, a fitness and health and wellness consulting group, building strong minds and bodies, and empowering one community at a time. Please follow us on Instagram and Facebook, and subscribe to our PIFNOLA YouTube channel, and leave questions or comments. You have been listening to the Awareness, Culture, and Wellness Podcast. We thank you for joining us, and we hope that you tune in to our next Wellness Wednesday as we discuss topics that heals the mind, body, and spirit. Until next time, I'm Robin Gabriel-Parson, your ACW podcast host. ACW is sponsored by Jabati. Self-care through skincare. Jabadi is for everybody.